What's up, everyone? Welcome to the first episode of Product Mastercast. Today's topic is around getting started in Agile or becoming a Scrum Master. This is one of the biggest questions that everyone gets asked. Lots of people are hearing about it and wanting to know how they can join the journey. So I thought for my first episode, why not bring the person that was there for my start, the person that helped me get my training done. He's someone that works for a company called Think Agile. And he does the training for them. So I'll let him explain, but Bevan Williams, thanks for joining us today.
Cool, thanks so much, Bobby. It's great to join in and help out where I can. So I'm an Agile coach and trainer at Think Agile. I met Bobby in one of our trainings in Cape Town, and then we've kind of interacted quite a lot since then in a lot of sites and meetups online.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's great to be here.
I'd love us to chat about the community because for me, I actually almost stumbled across it. And then once I realized what it was and how amazing it was, just the value that it has. So we can definitely touch on that as we talk. But I want to give you the opportunity to kind of, tell us about Bevan and tell us more about Think Agile. Like, what do you guys do there?
Yeah, so I've been with Think Agile now since the beginning of last year. So it's been about a year and a half now. We do a lot of Agile consulting, training, coaching. We work with from individuals all the way to large organizations, helping them with their journey towards a more Agile way of working. My own journey started with Agile over 10 years ago. So as an engineer, I was taught an iterative way of working in my first ever job. The manager that I had at the time never ever called it Agile at the time. It just made sense to build things in small increments and build onto what was there before. Having learned waterfall in university, right? So, you come out of university, you have this, I'm going to go out and change the world. And then you get there and the world's nothing like what they told you about.
Like that.
I got exposed to Scrum at some stage as a management tool. So I'm sure everyone's heard of the bad stories of Scrum being used as a micromanagement tool. That was my first experience as well. I was the kind of person that didn't like being told what to do, especially when it was something that I knew I could do better. So I went and learned how to become a Scrum Master on my own time and just kind of practice. So I had a very patient Scrum Master at the time who had to report to the manager and do whatever the manager said. But I learned a lot through him. And eventually I became a manager of a team. So not necessarily Scrum Master, but a manager of a team. And through that kind of learned how to apply this idea of servant leadership as a manager and grow Scrum Masters as well. And through that became an Agile coach and eventually moved to Think Agile.
Yeah. I find it so fascinating that people talk about that micromanagement. I find myself when I have to work with people that are a little bit older and have, maybe worked in a more waterfall sort of approach, they get a bit twitchy when you want to come and do this and they feel like we're micromanaging them, but it's not that. It's about breaking down the silos and all of that. But it's a great journey. I've really enjoyed also implementing it. Just another story on my side, because I was working at Sweep South at the time, and I went in and obviously from your lessons, I started implementing some of the stuff in there. And my manager, he used to work at Naspers. And I started putting stickies on the wall and he was like, oh, no, I've done this before. Is this Agile? I'm like, yeah, this is Agile. Yeah. So, thanks for that sort of introduction into Think Agile. I definitely we can chat about it again later. So my question I want to kind of start also with is, do you find that if somebody's interested in Agile, that Scrum Master is that entry point into it? Or how would you kind of advise someone that was interested in finding out how to get into the space?
That's a great question. It's one that I get asked a lot, both online, both in person. People are very generally quite curious as to, how do you get into it? I've obviously got my own idiosyncratic story experience of how I got into it. But the more people I meet and the more people I speak to about the same topic, I realize there's a common thread. Very few people I know actually just start in one of these Agile roles as a product owner or Scrum Master. They're generally in some ancillary or related role already. So a lot of people a development or testing background, so people that are actual individual contributors that kind of take on the role of the Scrum Master before making it official. And then I've been fortunate to experience the journey of people that have made complete career switches, but have had to make massive sacrifices either in salary or just, personal time to try and get into that role.
Yes, to start it off. So I've now transitioned from Scrum Master, and it was interesting because, like I said, working at Sweep South, they didn't have a product team. They didn't have any of that sort of in place yet. And so just trying to start implementing into the company, find myself now, when I look back, I was already doing a product owner role, but then, doing all the Scrum facilitations and stuff like that. So how does a person sort of separate that? I know that you guys, for example, have product owner courses. How does someone understand which one to do first, or do you feel it actually matters?
So that's another great question. So we've just recently launched a more generic framework-less Agile Fundamentals course. So it's also a certified course, so a certified Agile professional through IC Agile, which is also internationally recognized. And the reason for that was because while most people in the industry I know start off with something like the Certified Scrum Master, Certified Scrum Product Owner, it is very specific to a single framework. And what we have found is that South Africa as an industry is still very much dependent on certification. So, before even getting into that door, people want to see, hey, what is the certification that you have? Is it internationally recognized? Some semblance of competence or some kind of training or foundation level understanding of the topic before actually getting started in that. I've not seen people that haven't started with our certification. So in terms of people that have started and just done it themselves. So I started that way. I actually worked learning from extreme programming and Scrum for about 5 years before I got my certification. Sure. And I know quite a few other people that started that way as well, before certification became a requirement to being in that role. So there I was quite comfortable still being a developer. But I know that if I ever wanted to move into a Scrum Master role at a company, I would have needed that certification.
Yeah.
So the journey that people can take is very, very fluid. And depending on what they're passionate about, Certified Scrum Master in terms of that certification is probably the more generic one. Both CSM and CSPO start off with a very large portion of understanding of what the Agile mindset is. And then it goes into the specific of the role itself. So again, it depends what you're more passionate about.
I liked it. So when I did the course with you, it teaches you a framework. I always think of the saying, teach someone to fish and they can, eat forever, or, that whole saying. And I felt that's what you guys provided at the training. You gave us that framework of how do you go now and fish for yourself. Awesome. Any other sort of tips that you would like to maybe going forward?
Yeah, I think the one tip probably that's come up the most from people I've spoken to is actually, it's very difficult to start as a Scrum Master in South Africa with no experience. In fact, I've never seen a job ad saying, hey, we want to hire a Scrum Master with no experience. So what I've noticed for the people that have got into the industry, and you are one of the examples that I've used before, is what role are you in now? What are those lessons that you've learned can you bring into your job right now?
Exactly.
And that seems to be the thing. I mean, I know of people, a friend of mine, she wanted to get into the industry kind of as well, different perspective, but she could only get a job as a project manager. So it was like, well, go for it. You know what it could be. Try it and see how you can split it, right? So just because you have a title, the responsibilities you can still split. So that's a tip that I see is the most. Is if you can't get the job you want, create it.
100%. That's exactly what I did at Sweep South. I mean, I did the course with you guys, and then I was like, oh my gosh, I need to take this back to work. I really need to go implement these things. And I was in operations, and we had so many things that we were trying to do, and we had so many ideas and whatever. And then I just sat everyone down, got everyone to write down what their ideas were. And then we started playing poker with them. And I could literally see the light bulbs going off around the table. People were going, oh, okay, that means we need capacity for that because we all agree that's the most important thing. Boom.
Yeah.
The company wasn't the same.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much, there's quite a lot of stigma and context around these terms, Agile, Scrum, right? So you go to your company and say, we're going to do Scrum, and people immediately get, you mentioned it at the beginning, people kind of go like, oh, what's going to happen to my role? You don't go in there and say, we're going to do Scrum. Do there and say, hey, I want to try something. Like, let's try something. I learned this new technique for having a conversation around requirements. Like, can we give it a try? Like, let's just try it once. Or like you said, let's just put some stuff up on a wall and talk about the capacity, right? So, I mean, there's the skills that you learn in these trainings and the skills that you learn through your own, research and learning, you can still apply without having a formal role.
100%.
So, yeah.
Another big thing from my experience, what I did was there was the support team. So I was obviously in operations, and the operations and the support are obviously so linked, right? But there was no communication between the two. There was like these two silos. And I started having meetings where they were sitting around the table and we were like, well, we're dealing with the same people here. I'm still early in my journey. I'm like, okay, so users, we are dealing with the same users. Let's start understanding. I've got to do user stories at some point. Here I'm talking about users, and I just had the people sitting around the table and they started getting voices. They were like, I'm getting heard. And again, it was just all those small things happening on a daily basis. And I was like, wow, the learning curve was just like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the biggest legacies of the waterfall or traditional way of working that needs to fall for Agile to start working is just for people to speak to each other, right? We've built silos on expertise, and we're like, your bonus as an individual is more important than your collaboration with the rest. I mean, it's never said that directly, but essentially that's the behavior that, individual bonus kind of drive. And there's almost that joke about like, what do you do as a Scrum Master all day? It's, well, you tell people, hey, have you tried speaking to that person? So, it's very much that.
So I obviously left Sweeps Out, and then I went to another company and I was put on a project. And again, two very separate roles. It was a funny company. But there were these guys that were working in the company in the same office. Just one was like, on a higher level, but you could see each other because they just did that. They had been working at the company each for, I don't know how many years. I think the one was there for 8 years and the guy was there for 3 years. And I found myself going and asking the one downstairs the question, going up and telling, I was like, what am I doing? And I got the guy from downstairs. I said, come upstairs. I want you to chat to this guy. And I assumed that they'd known each other. And as I started talking about what I was trying to solve, it's like, you guys don't know each other. Whoa. You've been working here for 3 years and you haven't met each other. What? And what do Scrum Masters do? They facilitate that.
There you go. Yeah. And that's a lot of new Scrum Masters actually get quite, and I mean, I did as well, right? When I first learned about Scrum, I was like, I have to fix all the problems and resolve all the impediments. So we were quite deliberate in our training. We're like, if that doesn't mean you actually go and run between the people, like you said, it's resolving the impediment or facilitating the removal of impediments could simply just be and saying, hey, you have a problem. You sound like you have a solution. Why don't you have a conversation and see where it comes out, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. In that same company I'm talking about, did a very, very much that. And the guy, so what I did was like, okay, there was a very old, outdated software on the market, and we were tasked with now doing a rebuild and to make it modern. It looked like it was a Windows 95 program for a big retail company. I won't mention any names. Yeah. And so we were sort of outsourced to do this upgrade. And I just brought everyone in the room. I had UX and, the front end, back end. And I had the technical support guys that were dealing with the actual product on the market. And I got them all into a room and I started telling them what we were busy with. And the technical support guy, he was like, wow, we just made history in this company. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I've never sat in a room with a complete team of people working on the same product. I was like, oh.
Wow.
And it's those exactly right. No, and those are the things everyone takes for granted, like we spoke about earlier. What does a Scrum Master do, and there's a lot. And now in this remote, you need to facilitate that even that much more.
Correct. Yeah. I got a tip from, so I worked, remotely for so many years, working with the teams in Taiwan, Ukraine, Cape Town. And we managed to foster quite a good collaboration between some of the people. Like, I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to say it was perfect, but there were some teams that were inseparable. Like this day, even though all left the company multiple years ago, they're still in contact with each other. So, I mean, friendships can and will be formed over if you create space for that. I can't take credit for all of that. Like I said, that other Scrum Master that came in and brought in this whole idea of nonviolent communication and focused very much on the people element, a lot more than I ever could, and it was just amazing to see the change. So it can be done remotely. It's just you need to create that space for it. It's harder. It's more work. You have to be deliberate about it, but it definitely can and does happen. So
yeah. So I've got a Scrum Master that's joined our team, and a little bit inexperienced, but learning. And I'm like, just sort of feeding. I need you to coach the team and get them to understand these things. And you can see, because now it's in a remote setting. She joined the company during lockdown, right? So she's actually never met these people in person.
That's hard, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right. And now it's a matter of like, how do you facilitate these things? Like, you got to just keep going and keep coaching, keep talking, and just understand the fundamentals of what we need to do, and just drive it home. And I can see the light bulbs going and the learning for her as well, just doing this, which is also great to watch from my side.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, that's the thing with remote things. One of the big things that I've always learned is the idea that we don't only speak about work with our colleagues. When we're in an office together, there is a lot of time just spent talking about jokes. You see something on someone's desk and you have a conversation and say, "Oh, I love this cool knick-knack."
Oh man, I miss that.
And that falls away when we're remote, right? So like something a Scrum Master can do as well is just making space for, having a conversation that's not got anything to do about work as well. I know, so one of the colleagues I work with now, Dylan, I work with, he actually gave a good thing that they used to do when he used to work remote as well. He said they would have a Zoom call, or I don't know maybe it was Skype at the time, that was always on. So I know Teams does that quite easy. You can just have a call that's always on. You're listening in, and whenever you wanted to say something, you could either just go to that room and see who was there to have a chat, or you could just unmute yourself and have a chat. And that's like such a small little thing that could work quite well.
I've thought about that. That's like and it worked
for him. So he raved about it. I've never tried it to that extent. So I mean, even with working remotely so many years, like I learn things new all the time. I mean, you mentioned Sugza earlier and stuff as well. And like, I learn so much every single day that I speak to other people that are doing what I'm doing. So people that are new, people that have been doing it for, even longer than I have, but way longer than I have. So I'm quite fortunate. I've got some experienced colleagues. So I love it. I mean, as long as you're always open to learning new things, like you will just be amazed by all the things that people have tried and that have worked for them, that haven't worked for them. So there's a never ending list of things that you can try, especially with remote teams.
Yeah. So to give an example, we introduced a thing called Fun Fact of the Day. It started by me reading an article about what was the most viewed products on Takealot during lockdown. And it was vacuum cleaners. And I was like, guys, this fun fact of the day, vacuum cleaners is the most searched item on Takealot. And that just spiraled into fun fact of the day. The amount of things I've learned and the conversations that I had, like you said, like not seeing that knick-knack on the desk, we now, facilitating those conversations organically. I mean, did you know a banana is a herb? I mean, I still freak out about that one.
I don't know that. What?
And there's so many...
in any stews.
Yeah. So I want to kind of stick to the Scrum Master part of it, because I think a lot of people see that as like people hear more about the word Scrum Master than they hear of a product owner or a business analyst. So for the people that are watching, we can stick for those that want to learn more about Scrum Master. So one of the biggest questions that I get asked is, do you need to have technical knowledge or programming knowledge to become a Scrum Master? And go.
You've really lined up these really good questions. But this one I actually feel I'm weirdly excited to answer because I have my own strong views on this. And again, there's no right or wrong answer here. I'm gonna stick to the consultant's answer of it depends. In fact, the best answer I ever got to this, and it's the one that really has formed my opinion on this, is by a certified Scrum trainer in the UK by the name of Nigel Baker. And he actually calls this thing the Scrum scale. And what he does is kind of taken some of the concepts from Wardley mapping to talk about the fact that certain practices have more or less value depending on the time they're used within the team. So you imagine like an X and a Y axis. The Y axis of the graph is value to the team, and the X axis is time. So if you're working with a technical team that is using Scrum for the first time, it is probably more valuable to have a Scrum Master with technical experience. Over time, however, that value diminishes because the role of the Scrum Master is to kind of have the team become more self-organized and self-sufficient. So while it may be beneficial in the beginning and I'm speaking again from my own experience to add in, is it was useful for me to be able to teach the team and actually model the behavior of test-driven development and pair programming and mob programming to be able to teach people what it is and show people, hey, I'm with you on this journey. Over time, you step back because it's less valuable for you as a Scrum Master to be driving that change, and you kind of want the team themselves to take over that change. In that case, then it makes sense to step back. Having said that, one of my favorite experiences or observations of a new Scrum Master was a lady who had no technical experience at all. Never worked for a corporate company, never worked for a company that had done any form of software development or delivery, now being a Scrum Master for a team of technical people. So engineers, designers, testers, but this team had been quite experienced working together for a while. So they had a strong ownership of their technical domain.
Yes.
She came in completely with the expectation about she's there from the facilitation point of view, from the mentoring, from the coaching point of view, and taught them things that I never could have imagined. Things like nonviolent communication, speaking about emotions, and seeing the exponential growth of the performance of this team was just amazing to watch. So yes, there's value in having technical Scrum Masters, but no, not always. In fact, it probably in a way because you want to, show your technical side. So that's kind of my long-winded view of it.
No, I love that answer. That was a brilliant answer. And for me, why it's such a great answer is because compared to you, I'm still quite new in the industry. So when people ask me about the Scrum Master questions or like, what do we talk about? What do we teach? It's more about the framework. It's more about, what a story, user stories, how do you do estimations and stuff like that. But if I listen to people like you in the industry that have been around a lot longer, the conversation is actually very different. I went to a meetup and they spoke about understanding people's sleeping patterns and how to, how do you emphasize like when is the best time to do what? And we don't have those conversations. We're more about like velocity and, all those other things. But as you grow, I love that. I loved your answer. It's brilliant. So from my side, I wasn't the most technical person. I was working in a tech company, didn't have the tech experience, but I was exposed to it. So I understood it. And yeah, it's obviously evolved and changed. I didn't know all these things. I've learned now, but yeah, I was more of the servant leader. No, I loved your answer there. Thank you for that. What role do you kind of see Scrum Masters now? So, I mean, it's hard not to talk about COVID and working remote. I mean, that's just, I hate to use the word, the new norm, but how do you see Scrum Masters now in this new way of working? Put it this way, we hired a Scrum Master during lockdown. So what do you feel is the important thing for them?
So I'm aware of my bias here. I feel they're even more important now than before. So maybe not necessarily just the role of Scrum Master, but the idea of someone looking after the well-being of the team. So really, really focusing on this individuals and interactions element. So whether they're an Agile lead, Agile facilitator, Agile coach, Scrum Master, whatever you want to call it, there needs to be someone looking after that individuals and interactions element. So, when we move into this like crisis mode of COVID, the first thing we noticed at so many companies was this, let's fall back to processes and tools, right? first thing we need to do is make sure Jira is up to date, and we need to put rules in place about who can organize and do certain things. And, let's forget about, the agreements that teams have made. Let's focus solely on what, tools can do, for example. That was a bit of an extreme example, but I'm sure people will resonate with that because they've experienced that. But that's what happened is you kind of need people to remind everyone that says, hey, we're people behind these computers, and it becomes so much more important when we're always interacting with a screen. Even now, while speaking to you, it's the most tough thing. I'm trying to look in your eyes, but I also know the camera's over there. So
exactly. I gave up on that.
Yeah. So from the Scrum Masters themselves, I'm like, your role becomes more important. Your role becomes more focused on how do we get the best out of our team? How do we really encourage this drive to actual interactions? Because, even though Scrum and most Agile frameworks love the idea of co-location, I mean, it's one of the principles, right? Most effective form of communication is face-to-face. It's the most effective. It's not the only one. Right, so being aware of the fact that we can't be in person sitting next to each other, the Scrum Master has to become a lot more deliberate about remote facilitation.
I like that word. Yeah, no, absolutely. I can give an example. So I'm playing product owner. Like I said, we've got a Scrum Master now as well. And in our daily stand-up this week, I could just hear in someone's voice, because another topic that we can talk all on its own is cameras on or cameras off. But I could just hear in the guy's voice that he was not in a good space. So straight after stand up, you just send a message and you say, dude, what's up? And who's doing that for the teams? People forget that, I love the topic, like people want to get into the tech industry. They want to build products and everything, right? And we say, anything's possible. We just need to get, our understanding of what we want to build. Anything's possible. But behind that possibilities are the actual people that are building these things. And you can't look at it like when as a product owner, you're dealing with the stakeholders and the people that behind the product itself, right? And they just want delivery. They just want delivery. I'm like, especially now when we're all remote and we're all might be going through a bit of a tough time, you can't see them as a machine that's in a factory. They're a person, they're people, and they do still need to deliver. And someone needs to look after them and sort of help them facilitate their production and making sure that they don't just pull out work, that it's quality, and at the same time looking out for them and the team in the whole. I do really feel that I agree with you. There's actually more of an emphasis on Scrum Masters at this point. Because I was also in another meetup or a coaching circle, and one of the guys, came out and said that most companies let go of their Scrum Masters during this time because they saw that it was, excess. And I'm like, that actually cringes me because they're playing more of a role now than probably ever. I don't know, but so I don't know if you agree with that.
Well, I mean, I definitely agree on the observation, because that was an observation that I share as well. It felt like the first thing companies let go of was who are the people that are not directly contributing to our bottom line. That's what it felt like. And that's kind of the difficulty with the role of Scrum Master is it's this indirect delivery, right? It's kind of it's a value maximizer, right? In terms of the team, right? They're there to increase the effectiveness of the team, and it's not always direct. If a Scrum Master is really embracing the coaching stance or the coaching mindset, they've got this concept of post-heroics, right? It's kind of no one gives you credit for doing the work, but in fact, there's a example from the coaching that we teach as well, where it's when a client has a good coach, they say, "Wow, I have a good coach." But when a client has a great coach, they say, "Wow, I'm great." And that's the thing. The Scrum Master is doing an excellent job. They don't get the credit for doing it, right? And that's kind of the Scrum Masters work that way. So it is interesting because even from a business point of view, so not even from an individual's point of view, if COVID taught people anything, it's that you cannot predict the future. Right. So agility and Scrum and all these frameworks underneath this mindset of agility, embracing this mindset of agile, is to go, well, you cannot tell the future. When we have complex problems that we're trying to solve, the way we do it is that we actually do something and we kind of inspect and adapt on what we've built.
I was waiting for you to say those two words.
Mindset. Yeah. So embracing that mindset, especially with, a crisis like, COVID is essential. So I remember at the beginning of lockdown, the Harvard Kennedy School for Leadership, they actually sent out a memo that mentioned that. They were like, whatever you choose to call it, whether it's design thinking, whether it's agile, whether it's, any of those terms, that's the approach that leadership has to embrace. It's we're going into the unknown. Let's build something iterative, incremental, inspect and adapt. So those are the kind of the key words behind that. So it's interesting. It's interesting.
I love this conversation. So thank you, because I'm just thinking in my early days when I first, the whole like going to fish, this wouldn't have made a hell of a lot of sense. And I can't wait for people to be able to revisit this, hopefully as they go along. And once they get involved, they can actually unpack what you just said, because that was like brilliant. the topics around new people trying to get in, but that was a great, like sort of overarching, understanding of what Agile does for companies. So I advise people that are watching to revisit that conversation and what Bevan just gave us. Are there other trends that you're seeing at the moment or in the last couple of months? So let's look at COVID and outside of COVID. What kind of, because we talk about modern agility and all of that sort of stuff. Do you see any other trends coming out? Again, looking at people that want to get into it.
Absolutely. So, I mean, there is definitely a trend towards full organizations moving in this space, right? So people realizing that it's not just an IT-based thing. So the whole concept of organizational agility, in other words, different parts of the organization and, broader business agility, having the business itself being able to become more agile in terms of what they offer and the value that they get from the market. And those are trends that are just picking up more and more and more. So in terms of where you are or starting off, those concepts, those high-level concepts of business agility and organizational agility, they do not work unless there's a strong foundation. So all of them have their roots kind of, even if you look at some of the biggest scaling frameworks, they all start off with this idea that you need to get it right at a team level before you start, spreading it out. And just, kind of forcing your whole company to suddenly start doing daily stand-ups and using tons of Post-it notes. It's useful to actually do it at a team level. So in terms of team level ambassadors or leaders, there's definitely a need. And we've noticed, at least from our side, that as much as there was a bit of a drop-off with the start of lockdown in terms of, a lot of Scrum Masters are being let go, hiring for those roles completely drying up, there's definitely been a pickup in the last few weeks as well. And I think people are starting to realize that, right? So as more and more articles come out to say, hey, these are the companies that thrived, these are the companies that didn't, these were the common elements, people are starting to see a need for that and realizing we actually need to get our teams back on track. So it is quite positive from what I've seen.
Okay. No, I can see that as well. I think there's so many things in the framework that provide value for a company. Just prioritizing a backlog, for example, inspecting and adapting, and then looking at your backlog and prioritizing it. I mean, that needs to be facilitated. Those things need to be done, and it helps the company in totality. So Bevan, we're going to wrap up. This has been amazing. But before we go, tell me sort of what are you up to? Is there anything any projects that you're busy with, whether it's from Bevan's side or Think Agile? Anything that you want to tell the people that you're busy with?
Well, I think from a company side, we're really busy focusing quite a lot on our coaching and consulting. So one of my pets little projects that we kind of started a while ago and we're trying to pick up is a recruitment product specifically for Scrum Masters. So we're partnering with companies. We've run it through a few iterations yet. We're still learning on it. But the idea is that we would like to help companies with the competency side of Scrum Masters. So using our expertise of training Scrum Masters, certifying Scrum Masters, and having been in the role for a long time, we try to remove as much bias out of the process as possible. So we've actually created a scientific model for the process, and then charging a recruitment fee like a normal recruitment company. And then we actually give that full feedback to the company for training credits. So part of the process is we give an evaluation and we say, look, these are maybe elements that the Scrum Master you're hiring could work on. Hey, we have training for this and it's it's covered as part of the fee that you pay. It's kind of for the industry. From a personal thing, I think my passion at the moment now is having conversations on equity. So trying to get more involved in the Agile Alliance initiative to speak about creating racial equity. So I'm sure you know in America they're having deep conversations about Black Lives Matter. In South Africa, we have our own problems. So there's a personal passion that I have in working in starting those conversations here and seeing, how can we kind of talk about the roles that are covered under Agile and how can we make it more diverse and how can we.
Oh man, I love that. Do you know how many times I hear of companies hiring in India and Russia and whatnot, and it just gives me a pain in my neck here. I'm like, South Africa, there's massive unemployment and we could be helping people fill these roles. Like, why aren't we focusing time on that? So that's great. Keep the conversation going, man. That's awesome.
We will do. It's new. I mean, we've started it. We've had things before that we've done, and it hasn't worked. So we've obviously I'm part of the SUGSA committee as well. So SUGSA has done a lot of things as well, and then we kind of realized that maybe there's the need for more conversation, even viewing SUGSA from a third person perspective as well. So kind of almost observing it outside the organization and seeing what we need to do differently as well. So I'm excited. It's early on, but I'm looking forward to what we're coming out of. The conversations we've had with really influential Agilists overseas have been really, really positive. So I'm excited to see what we can do in the next few months. And
that sounds
we can just
awesome.
keep improving the Agile industry.
That sounds brilliant, Bevan. I wish you all the best. And we can chat, but send some links over and we can give it to people that want to get involved in the conversation. So let's please do that.
Awesome. Well, we'll do.
Cool. Well, Bevan, I'm going to cap it there. I feel like we could probably talk for another half an hour to an hour, but thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And hopefully maybe we can see you again.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bobby. Appreciate you for having me on.
Cool. No, it's been awesome. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Cool. Cheers, man.